The rain hammered against the cracked pavement like 1,000 tiny fists, each drop exploding into mist that clung to my ankles as I ran. My lungs burned with every desperate breath, the cold October air stabbing at my throat. Behind me, I could hear him, Derek's voice rising above the storm, slurred and furious, spitting threats that made my blood run cold. "Elena, you think you can just walk away from me?" My worn sneakers slapped against the wet concrete, barely finding purchase as I rounded the corner onto a street I didn't recognize. The world had narrowed to tunnel vision. Just the next storefront, the next alley, the next possible refuge. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my temples, in my wrists, in every panicked step. I'd been stupid. So incredibly stupid. When Derek had texted earlier, claiming he wanted closure, claiming he'd changed, I'd actually considered meeting him in a public place. Just to talk, he'd said, just to explain. But the moment I'd seen him waiting outside my apartment building, I'd known. The wildness in his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were already clenched into fists. This wasn't about closure. This was about control. He'd lunged for me the second I'd tried to back away, and I'd run. Just run, without thinking, without grabbing my phone that now lay shattered on the sidewalk 3 blocks back, without any plan beyond putting distance between us. "I said stop!" Derek's voice was closer now, and I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was maybe half a block behind, his tall frame cutting through the rain-soaked street, his white shirt plastered to his chest. The streetlights caught the rage on his face, and my stomach twisted with terror. I knew that look. I'd seen it the night he'd put his fist through my apartment wall, the night I'd finally found the courage to leave. My eyes scanned the street frantically. Most of the shops were closed at this hour, their windows dark and unwelcoming. But ahead, maybe 50 feet away, I spotted a warm glow spilling onto the wet pavement. A store, its elegant script sign barely visible through the downpour. I didn't care what it was. A bakery, a bookshop, a funeral home. It was open, and that was all that mattered. I pushed my legs harder, ignoring the burning in my calves and the stitch forming in my side. The distance closed. 40 feet, 30, 20. I could make out details now. Expensive-looking wooden doors with brass handles, large windows displaying what looked like leather goods in tasteful arrangements. Some kind of high-end boutique, probably somewhere I'd never normally set foot. "Elena, I swear to God." I hit the door at full speed, my wet hands slipping once on the brass before finding purchase. The door swung open with surprising ease, and I practically fell inside, stumbling over the threshold and catching myself against a display table. Something expensive-looking wobbled dangerously, but I barely noticed as I spun around to push the door closed behind me. The comparative quiet was shocking. Outside, Derek had pulled up short, maybe 10 feet from the entrance, his chest heaving. Even through the rain-streaked glass, I could see the calculation in his eyes. Would he follow me inside? Would he dare? For a moment, we stared at each other through the glass, hunter and prey separated by a single pane and the fragile protection of being in public. Then I became aware of the silence behind me. The kind of silence that comes when every person in a room has stopped what they're doing and turned to look at you. I turned slowly, my back still pressed against the door, and took in my surroundings properly for the first time. The shop was nothing like I'd imagined from the outside. It was elegant, certainly. But there was something else beneath the surface elegance, something dark and purposeful. The leather goods I'd glimpsed in the window weren't ordinary handbags and wallets. They were briefcases, document folders, the kind of items that screamed power and money. The walls were lined with dark wood paneling, and the lighting was low and atmospheric, casting shadows in the corners. But it was the people who truly made my breath catch. There were 3 men in the shop, all wearing suits that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. They'd been standing around a large mahogany table at the back of the shop, clearly in the middle of some discussion. But now all three had turned to face me. Their expressions ranged from surprise to wary, and I noticed with a spike of fresh fear that one of them had his hand inside his jacket, a gesture that made me think of weapons, of danger of an entirely different sort than what waited for me outside. But it was the fourth man who captured and held my attention. He'd been seated in a leather chair near the back wall, one leg crossed over the other, a crystal glass of amber liquid in his hand. Unlike the others, he hadn't turned abruptly at my entrance. Instead, he'd moved with deliberate slowness, setting down his glass with precise care, before rising to his feet with a fluid grace that somehow made the violence in my recent sprint seem crude and graceless by comparison. He was tall, taller than Derek, I noted with some distant part of my mind, with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit perfectly. His dark hair was styled back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once and reset with surgical precision. But it was his eyes that truly arrested me. Dark, almost black in the low light, they fixed on me with an intensity that made my earlier fear of Derek seem almost quaint. This man was dangerous in a way Derek could never be. Derek's violence was hot and impulsive, born of insecurity and a desperate need to control. But this man's danger was cold, calculated, contained. He looked at me the way a predator might study prey, not with Derek's manic desperation, but with absolute certainty of his own power. "I apologize," I managed, my voice coming out rough and breathless. I was acutely aware of how I must look, soaked through, my dark hair plastered to my face, my simple jeans and sweater clinging to me uncomfortably, my chest still heaving from my sprint. "I didn't mean to intrude, The bang on the door behind me cut off my explanation. I jumped, pressing myself harder against it, as Derek's voice filtered through the glass. "Elena, come out here. Now." The four men in the shop had gone very still. The one who'd had his hand in his jacket had now fully drawn what I realized with sick certainty was a gun, though he kept it down by his side. The other two had moved slightly, positioning themselves with a practiced ease that spoke of experience with threats. But the dark-haired man, the one who commanded the room without saying a word, simply tilted his head slightly, his gaze moving from me to the door behind me, then back to my face. "Friend of yours?" he asked, and his voice matched everything else about him. Deep, controlled, with an undertone of danger that made my spine straighten involuntarily. "Ex-boyfriend," I corrected automatically, then wondered why I'd felt compelled to clarify. "Please, I just need to wait until he leaves. I'll go then, I promise. I won't bother you or—" Derek hit the door again, harder this time, and I felt it shudder against my back. "I can see you talking to them. You think they're going to protect you? Come out here and we'll talk. Just talk, baby. That's all I want." The endearment made my skin crawl. Baby. He used to call me that while pinning my wrist to the bed, while scrolling through my phone looking for evidence of imagined betrayals, while explaining in that calm, terrifying voice exactly what he'd do to any man who looked at me. "He seems persistent," the dark-haired man observed, and there was something in his tone that I couldn't quite identify. Amusement? Interest? He stepped forward, his movements unhurried but purposeful, until he stood only a few feet away from me. Up close, he was even more imposing. He was perhaps 35, maybe a bit older, with the kind of presence that made you want to either run or kneel. There was a thin scar along his jawline, barely visible, but adding to his air of controlled danger. He smelled of expensive cologne, something woody and complex, and of power. "Please," I said again, hating the desperation in my voice but unable to stop it. "I just need him to leave. He'll get bored eventually. He always does. Those dark eyes studied me with an intensity that made me feel exposed, as though he could see through my soaked clothes, through my skin, directly into the fear that sat like a stone in my chest. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a shark might give if sharks could smile. All teeth and no humor, promising nothing good for anyone on the receiving end. "Gentlemen," he said, still looking at me, but clearly addressing the others. "It seems we have an uninvited guest being harassed on our doorstep. This won't do at all. Bad for business." "Want me to handle it, boss?" The man with the gun spoke up, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent. Boss. The word registered somewhere in my consciousness, but I was too focused on what was happening to fully process its implications. "No, Marco," the dark-haired man said, his eyes never leaving mine. "This requires a more personal touch." He moved past me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell that intoxicating cologne more strongly, and reached for the door handle. Instinctively, I moved aside, my back now against the wall instead of the door. "Wait," I said urgently. He might get violent. He has before." The man paused, his hand on the brass handle, and looked back at me over his shoulder. "Has he?" he asked, and his voice had gone even colder. "With you?" I nodded, unable to find words. Something shifted in those dark eyes. "Then this will be even more satisfying." He opened the door and stepped out into the rain in one smooth motion. I watched through the window, my heart in my throat, as he faced Derek on the wet pavement. Derek took a step back, clearly surprised by this new development. "Who the hell are you?" I heard him demand. "This is between me and my girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," the dark-haired man corrected, his voice carrying clearly despite the rain. "And she's currently seeking refuge in my establishment. I'm afraid I can't have you disturbing my business with your domestic disputes." "Your business?" Derek laughed, though it sounded uncertain. "It's a shop, man. Tell her to come out here and we'll be gone." "No." The single word was delivered with such finality that Derek actually took another step back. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Derek said, trying a different approach. "I just want to talk to Elena. 5 minutes, that's all I need." "The young woman doesn't wish to speak with you. I suggest you leave." "Or what?" Derek's voice rose again, his usual bravado returning. "You'll call the cops? Go ahead. I'll tell them she's my girlfriend, that we just had a fight, that she's overreacting like she always does. I won't call the police." The way he said it made even me shiver, and I was inside, supposedly safe. Derek must have heard it too, because he went very still. "I'll give you one more chance to walk away," the dark-haired man continued, his voice still calm, still controlled, but with an edge that promised terrible things. "Walk away now, and you can keep all your fingers. Stay, and I'll take them off one by one and feed them to my dog. Your choice." "You can't," Derek started, but he was backing away even as he spoke. 30 seconds, the man said. 29, 28. Derek looked past him to the window, to where I stood watching. For a moment, our eyes met through the glass, and I saw confusion and rage and something else, the first hint of real fear, cross his face. Then he was moving, walking backward at first, then turning and jogging away into the rain. The dark-haired man stood there for a moment longer, watching Derek disappear around the corner. Only when he was satisfied that the threat had gone did he turn and walk back into the shop. He moved with the same unhurried grace, seemingly unbothered by the rain that now darkened his expensive suit and slicked his hair back from his face. I pressed myself harder against the wall as he entered and closed the door behind him with a soft click. Water dripped from his suit onto the polished floor, but he didn't seem to notice or care. His eyes found mine immediately, pinning me in place. "Thank you," I managed, my voice small. "I don't know what I would have done if—" "You would have waited him out," he interrupted, "and hoped he'd eventually leave you alone. And perhaps he would have. This time." The last two words hung in the air between us, weighted with meaning. I started, but he was already moving toward me. He stopped close, too close, well inside what any normal person would consider personal space, and studied me with those dark, intense eyes. This close, I could see flecks of bronze in the black, could count the individual drops of rain caught in his eyelashes, could feel the power radiating off him like heat. "Your ex-boyfriend," he said, and it wasn't quite a question. "Yes." "How long since you left him?" 3 months. "And he's still bothering you?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or disgust. "Men who put their hands on women are cowards," he said quietly. "They deserve nothing but pain." There was such conviction in his voice, such barely restrained violence, that I found myself believing every word. "I should go," I said, though I wasn't sure where I'd go. My apartment wasn't safe anymore. Derek knew where it was. I had no phone to call anyone, no money for a cab, even if I could find one in this rain. "Thank you again for—" "No," I blinked. "No? You're not leaving. Not yet." He turned away from me, addressing the other men. "Gentlemen, our business is concluded for tonight. Marco, ensure our uninvited guest hasn't circled back. Take Sal and Gio with you." The 3 men moved immediately, efficiently. Marco holstered his gun with practiced ease, and all 3 headed for the door. As Marco passed, he gave me a curious look, not threatening, but assessing, as though trying to understand what I was to his boss. Then they were gone, and I was alone in the shop with this dangerous, fascinating stranger. "What's your name?" he asked, moving to the back of the shop where his unfinished drink waited. "Elena," I answered automatically. "Elena Carter." "Elena." He said my name like he was tasting it, deciding whether he liked the flavor. "Beautiful name. Italian?" "My grandmother was." He nodded, picking up his glass and taking a slow sip before setting it down again. "I'm Ethan Moretti." The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should. As if he expected recognition, perhaps even fear. "Thank you, Mr. Moretti," I said formally, trying to regain some sense of normalcy. "I really should be going, though. I don't want to take up any more of your time." "You'll stay," he said simply, as though it were already decided, "until I'm certain he won't be waiting for you outside. Until I'm certain you're safe." "I can take care of myself." "Can you?" The question was delivered without mockery or derision, but it still stung because we both knew the answer. If I could take care of myself, I wouldn't have burst into his shop like a drowned rat, fleeing from a man I should have had the strength to stand up to long ago. "I'll be fine," I said instead, lifting my chin. "But thank you." Ethan moved then, crossing the space between us in 3 long strides that reminded me of a predator closing in on prey. He stopped when he was once again too close, his dark eyes boring into mine. "You'll be fine," he repeated, and there was something in his voice that made it sound less like an agreement and more like a promise. "Because I'll make certain of it, because you're mine now to protect." "I'm not yours," I said, but the words came out uncertain, almost like a question. His smile was slow, dangerous, and absolutely certain. "Aren't you Elena Carter? You came to me for protection. You stood in my shop and asked me to keep you safe, and I have decided to grant that request. That makes you mine." That's not... I struggled to find words, but he was already moving away, picking up his phone from the table. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to one of the leather chairs. "You're shaking." I realized. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me cold and trembling in my soaked clothes. Almost against my will, I found myself moving to the chair and sinking into it. It was impossibly soft, still warm from where he'd been sitting, and I pulled my arms around myself to try to stop the shivering. Ethan spoke into his phone in rapid Italian, too fast and fluid for me to follow. When he ended the call, he turned back to me. "My car will be here in 5 minutes. I'm taking you home." "I can get home on my own." "He knows where you live," Ethan interrupted. "Or did you forget that detail?" The words were like ice water. Derek did know where I lived. He'd probably go there next, wait for me to return. I'd be trapped in my own apartment, unable to leave without facing him. "I'll stay with a friend," I said, though I wasn't sure which friend would take me in soaked and phoneless at this hour. "You'll come home with me," Ethan corrected. "You'll stay in one of my guest rooms until I've ensured your ex-boyfriend won't be a problem anymore." "You can't just—" I started, but the words died in my throat. Because I was beginning to understand what Elena Carter, in her rain-soaked desperation, had stumbled into. This wasn't just a shop. These weren't just businessmen having a meeting. And Ethan Moretti wasn't just some good Samaritan helping a woman in distress. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something I should run from just as fast as I'd run from Derek. But as I looked into Ethan Moretti's dark eyes, I realized with a strange mix of terror and relief that running was no longer an option. I was his now, and somehow I knew my life would never be the same. The car that arrived 5 minutes later wasn't what I expected. I'd been picturing something ostentatious. A limousine maybe, or one of those flashy sports cars that screamed money and poor taste. Instead, it was a sleek black Mercedes S-Class that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. The kind of car that cost more than most people made in a year, but looked understated enough that only those who knew would recognize its value. The driver who emerged was Marco, the same man who'd had his hand on his gun earlier. He opened an umbrella with practiced efficiency and held it over Ethan as we exited the shop. I noticed he didn't offer one to me, though whether that was deliberate rudeness or simply because his hands were full, I couldn't tell. "Get in," Ethan said, gesturing to the open rear door. I hesitated on the threshold, my last chance to refuse, to walk away, to choose the devil I knew over the one I didn't. But the rain was still falling, and somewhere out there, Derek was probably circling back, and the interior of the Mercedes looked warm and safe, and infinitely preferable to wandering the streets alone. I got in. The interior smelled of leather and that same woody cologne Ethan wore. The seats were heated, and as I sank into the soft leather, I couldn't suppress a small sound of relief as warmth began to seep into my rain-chilled body. Ethan slid in beside me, close enough that I was hyper-aware of his presence, but not quite touching. Marco closed the door and moved around to the driver's seat. "Where to, boss?" Marco asked, catching Ethan's eye in the rearview mirror. "Home," Ethan replied simply. As the car pulled away from the curb, I watched the shop recede through the rain-streaked window. The elegant sign above the door came into focus for the first time. Moretti & Sons, Fine Leather Goods, Esther 1952. "It was my grandfather's shop," Ethan said, noticing my gaze. "He started it when he first came to America, built it into something respectable." There was something in the way he said respectable that made me think he was referring to more than just the quality of the leather goods. "You said you were having a business meeting," I ventured, trying to make sense of what I'd stumbled into. "In a leather shop after hours." His lips curved into that dangerous smile again. "I conduct business wherever it's convenient, Elena, and that shop has excellent privacy." The pause before privacy told me everything I needed to know. I'd interrupted something that had nothing to do with briefcases and document folders. Something that required guns and men who moved like soldiers and a level of control that seemed to come as naturally to Ethan as breathing. "What kind of business are you in, Mr. Moretti?" I asked, then immediately regretted the question. There were things it was safer not to know. "The kind that requires discretion," he answered, his dark eyes studying me in the dim interior of the car. "The kind that values loyalty above all else. The kind that doesn't tolerate threats to what's mine." That word again, mine. He used it so easily, with such certainty, as though I'd actually agreed to become his possession. "I'm not yours," I said again, more firmly this time. "You helped me and I'm grateful, but that doesn't mean you own me." "Doesn't it?" He shifted in his seat, turning toward me more fully. "You came to me for protection. I gave it. That's how these things work, Elena. Someone provides a service, and the recipient becomes obligated. I didn't ask to become obligated to you. I just ran into your shop to get away from Derek. And yet here you are, in my car, on your way to my home, under my protection. Whether you asked for it or not, you have it now, and I don't give my protection lightly, Elena. When I choose to protect something, it becomes mine to protect, which means it's mine." The circular logic made my head spin. Or maybe that was just exhaustion and the adrenaline crash finally hitting me in full force. I sagged back against the heated seat, suddenly too tired to argue. "I'll stay tonight," I conceded. "Because you're right. I can't go back to my apartment. But tomorrow I'll figure something else out. I'll stay with a friend or—" "You'll stay with me," Ethan interrupted, his voice allowing no argument. "Until I'm satisfied that your ex-boyfriend is no longer a threat." "And how long will that take?" His smile was cold. "Not long. I'm very efficient at eliminating threats." The way he said eliminating made my blood run cold. I opened my mouth to ask what exactly he meant, then closed it again. Some questions were better left unasked. We drove in silence for a while, the city lights strobing across Ethan's face as we moved through the rain-slicked streets. I tried to pay attention to where we were going, tried to memorize landmarks in case I needed to find my way back, but exhaustion was making everything blur together. We seemed to be heading north, away from my neighborhood, and into areas where the buildings got progressively nicer, the streets wider, the cars more expensive. Finally, the Mercedes turned into a private drive, flanked by stone pillars and an iron gate that opened automatically at our approach. We wound up a tree-lined road for what felt like half a mile before the house came into view. House was too small a word for it. Mansion barely covered it. The structure that rose before us was something out of a movie, all stone and glass and architectural angles that spoke of serious money and even more serious taste. Lights illuminated the front facade, making the rain sparkle like diamonds as it fell across the manicured grounds. "This is where you live?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "One of the places I live," Ethan corrected. "I have apartments in the city, but I prefer the privacy here." Privacy. That word again, loaded with meaning. Marco pulled the car around to the front entrance, where another man with an umbrella was already waiting. This one was older, perhaps in his 60s, wearing what looked like butler's attire. He opened Ethan's door first, shielding him from the rain, then moved to my side. "Welcome home, Mr. Moretti," he said with a slight Italian accent, as I emerged into the protected circle of the umbrella. His eyes flickered over me, taking in my soaked clothes, my bedraggled appearance, my obvious discomfort, but his expression remained professionally neutral. "Thank you, Giovanni," Ethan replied, already moving toward the entrance. "This is Miss Carter. She'll be staying with us for a while. Please prepare the blue guest room and have some appropriate clothing brought up. I believe Miss Carter could use something warm and dry." "Of course, sir. Shall I have the kitchen prepare something as well?" Ethan glanced back at me. "Have you eaten, Elena?" I tried to remember the last time I'd had a meal. Breakfast, maybe? The day had been such a blur of work and fear that food had been the last thing on my mind. "Not recently," I admitted. "Have Maria prepare a light meal," Ethan instructed Giovanni. "Something warm. Soup, perhaps. Right away, sir. The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. We entered into a grand foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. Original artwork lined the walls. Not prints, but actual paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. Everything spoke of wealth, but it was old wealth, established wealth, the kind that didn't need to prove anything to anyone. This way, Ethan said, gesturing toward a sweeping staircase. I followed him up, my wet sneakers squeaking embarrassingly on the marble steps. We climbed to the second floor and walked down a hallway lined with more expensive artwork. Ethan stopped at a door about halfway down and pushed it open. "This is your room," he announced. I stepped inside and immediately felt out of place. The room was beautiful, decorated in shades of blue and cream, with a 4-poster bed that looked like something from a luxury hotel, a sitting area with a view of the grounds, and doors that presumably led to a bathroom and closet. It was easily 3 times the size of my entire apartment. "The bathroom is through there," Ethan said, pointing to one of the doors. "You'll find everything you need. Giovanni will bring clothes shortly. I'll have your meal sent up unless you'd prefer to eat downstairs." "Up here is fine," I said quickly. The thought of sitting in some formal dining room with Ethan watching me try to navigate unfamiliar silverware and make polite conversation was more than I could handle. He nodded, seeming to understand. "I'll leave you to get settled then. My room is at the end of the hall if you need anything." He moved to leave, then paused in the doorway and turned back to face me. "Elena," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it yet. "You're safe here. Whatever else you might think of me, whatever you might fear, understand this. While you're under my roof, no one will hurt you. Not your ex-boyfriend, not anyone. You have my word." There was such absolute conviction in his voice that I found myself believing him, despite everything. Despite the guns and the cryptic talk of business, and the way he kept calling me his. In this moment, looking into those dark eyes, I believed that Ethan Moretti would protect me with everything he had. "Thank you," I whispered. He inclined his head in acknowledgement, then left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone for the first time since fleeing into his shop, I let myself collapse onto the edge of the bed. My hands were shaking again. Not from cold this time, but from the delayed shock of everything that had happened. Derek chasing me through the rain, bursting into that shop, Ethan's cold threat to feed Derek his own fingers, the drive here, this room, this house, this entire surreal situation. What had I gotten myself into? A soft knock at the door made me look up. "Come in," I called, expecting Giovanni with the clothes. Instead, a woman entered, perhaps 50, with kind eyes and graying dark hair pulled back in a bun. She carried a tray with a bowl of soup and what looked like fresh bread, along with a pot of tea. "Miss Carter," she said, with a warm smile that immediately put me more at ease than anything else since I'd entered this house. "I'm Maria, the housekeeper. Mr. Moretti said you might need something warm." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "That's very kind." She set the tray on a small table near the sitting area. "Giovanni will be up shortly with some clothes. In the meantime, there are robes in the bathroom if you'd like to get out of those wet things. Can't have you catching cold." There was something maternal in her concern that made my throat tighten unexpectedly. "Thank you, Maria." She smiled again, then surprised me by reaching out and gently squeezing my shoulder. "Mr. Moretti is a good man," she said quietly. "Complicated perhaps, but good. You're safe here, dear. Whatever brought you to us, you're safe." Before I could respond, she was gone, closing the door gently behind her. I sat there for a moment, processing her words. A good man. Complicated. Safe. Finally, I forced myself to move. The soup was calling to me, but Maria was right. I needed to get out of these wet clothes first. I made my way to the bathroom and stopped short at the threshold. If the bedroom was impressive, the bathroom was decadent. All marble and glass, with a shower that could easily fit 3 people and a tub that looked deep enough to swim in. Fluffy white towels were stacked on heated racks. The counter was lined with expensive toiletries, the kind I'd only ever seen in luxury hotel gift shops. I caught sight of myself in the mirror and winced. I looked exactly like what I was, a drowned rat who'd been running for her life. My dark hair hung in wet tangles around my face. My minimal makeup had run down my cheeks in black streaks. My clothes clung to me in the least flattering way possible. This was what Ethan Moretti had seen when he'd looked at me. This desperate, bedraggled woman who'd burst into his shop like a disaster in human form. And yet he'd looked at me and decided I was his to protect. His to claim. I stripped off my wet clothes, leaving them in a soggy pile on the floor, and found one of the robes Maria had mentioned. It was thick and soft, probably Egyptian cotton or something equally luxurious, and wrapped around me like a warm hug. Back in the bedroom, I devoured the soup, some kind of Italian wedding soup with tiny meatballs and vegetables that tasted homemade, and 2 thick slices of bread with butter. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I started eating, and before I knew it, the bowl was empty, and I was eyeing the teapot. Another knock, and this time it was Giovanni with a stack of clothes. "These should fit, Miss Carter," he said, setting them on the bed. "If you need anything adjusted, please let me know. I'll be happy to have our tailor come by tomorrow." Their tailor. Of course they had a tailor. "Thank you, Giovanni." He hesitated at the door. "Miss Carter, if I may, Mr. Moretti is very particular about who he brings into his home. The fact that you're here, that he's extended his protection to you, it means something. I've worked for the Moretti family for 30 years, and I've never seen him quite so decisive about someone." I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I just nodded. Giovanni gave a small bow and left. I examined the clothes he'd brought. Everything was expensive. I could tell that much even without looking at labels. Soft cashmere sweaters in muted colors, well-cut jeans that would actually fit despite Giovanni never asking my size, silk pajamas that probably cost more than a week of my salary. And underneath everything, expensive lingerie in what I belatedly realized was exactly my size. How did they know my size? The question sent a small chill through me, but I was too tired to dwell on it. I changed into the silk pajamas. They felt sinfully soft against my skin, and climbed into the enormous bed. The sheets were high thread count, the comforter like sleeping under a cloud. I should have felt uncomfortable, should have been too wired to sleep, should have been making plans for tomorrow. Instead, I was asleep almost before my head hit the pillow. I woke to daylight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close the curtains on. For a moment, I was disoriented, struggling to place where I was. This wasn't my apartment. The bed was too soft, the room too large, the light all wrong. Then memory came flooding back. Derek, the chase, the shop, Ethan Moretti and his cold promise to make me his. I sat up, pushing my tangled hair out of my face, and looked around the room properly for the first time. In daylight, it was even more beautiful than I'd realized. The blue tones were calming, the furniture clearly antique and well-maintained. Through the windows, I could see manicured grounds stretching toward a tree line in the distance. A glance at the clock on the nightstand told me it was nearly 10 in the morning. I never slept this late. My body must have needed the rest more desperately than I'd realized. I was still deciding what to do, stay in the room, venture out, try to figure out how to get home, when yet another knock came at the door. "Come in," I called, pulling the comforter up higher over the silk pajamas. Maria entered with another tray, this one loaded with coffee, fruit, and what looked like freshly made pastries. "Good morning, Miss Carter. I hope you slept well." "Very well, actually. Thank you. She set the tray on the table. Mr. Moretti asked me to let you know he'd like to see you when you're ready. He's in his office. Giovanni can show you the way when you've finished breakfast. His office? Yes, dear. He works from home most days. She smiled. Take your time. There's no rush. After she left, I got up and poured myself coffee from the silver pot. It was perfect, rich and strong, and selected a pastry that turned out to be some kind of almond croissant that melted in my mouth. As I ate, I tried to process what Maria had said. Ethan wanted to see me. In his office. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a summons disguised as a polite invitation. I finished breakfast, then showered in that decadent bathroom, using products that probably cost more than my entire morning routine at home. I dried my hair with the professional-grade hairdryer I found in a drawer, then selected clothes from the stack Giovanni had brought. I chose jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater, both of which fit perfectly, along with simple flats. When I emerged from the room, Giovanni was waiting in the hallway, as though he'd somehow known the exact moment I'd be ready. "This way, Miss Carter," he said, leading me back downstairs and through a series of hallways to a set of double doors near the back of the house. He knocked once, then opened the door at a muffled response from within. The office was everything I'd expected: masculine, powerful, slightly intimidating. Dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk that probably weighed more than my car. And behind that desk, backlit by windows overlooking the grounds, sat Ethan Moretti. He looked up as I entered, and I was struck again by how impossibly handsome he was. In daylight, I could see details I'd missed in the dim shop and the car's interior. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes. The way his dark hair fell just slightly across his forehead, despite being styled back. The perfect tailoring of his navy suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. "Elena," he said, rising to his feet with that fluid grace. "Please, sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk, and I sat, feeling like a student called to the principal's office. Ethan didn't sit back down. Instead, he moved around the desk and leaned against it, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. The power dynamic was obvious, and I suspected, intentional. "You slept well?" he asked. "Yes, thank you. Your home is very comfortable." His lips curved slightly. "It's your home, too, for as long as you need it." "About that," I began, ready to launch into the speech I'd been rehearsing. About how grateful I was, but how I couldn't possibly impose, how I'd figure something else out today. But Ethan held up a hand, stopping me. "Before you tell me you're leaving, there's something you should know." He picked up his phone from the desk and tapped the screen a few times, then handed it to me. This was taken about 2 hours ago. I looked at the screen. It showed a photo of my apartment building, and standing in front of the entrance, looking up at the windows with barely controlled rage on his face, was Derek. My blood ran cold. He's been there all night? According to my man who's been watching, he showed up around midnight and has been there ever since, occasionally going up to your door, knocking, calling your name. The neighbors have called the police twice. He leaves when they arrive, then comes back 20 minutes later. I stared at the photo, feeling my carefully constructed plan to leave today crumble. I can't go back there. "No," Ethan agreed, taking the phone back. "You can't, not until I've dealt with him." "Dealt with him how?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Ethan's expression was unreadable. "Leave that to me. For now, you'll stay here where it's safe, where I can protect you." "I have a job," I protested weakly. "I'm supposed to work today." "They'll fire me if I don't show up." "Where do you work?" "Cafe Reggio. It's a coffee shop on—" "I know it," Ethan interrupted. "Consider it handled." You can't just handle my job. I can, and I will." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Elena, you need to understand something. When I said you were mine to protect, I meant it. That includes protecting your job, your apartment, your life, everything. You don't need to worry about any of it anymore. That's my responsibility now." "I didn't ask for this," I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. "I didn't ask to become your responsibility." "No," he agreed, moving closer until he was standing directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. "You asked for help. You ran into my shop, terrified and desperate, and asked me to keep you safe from a man who wanted to hurt you. And I said yes. This is what that yes means, Elena. It means I take care of you. It means you're under my protection. It means you're mine." "Stop saying that," I whispered, though my protest sounded weak even to my own ears. "Why? Because it frightens you? Because it's the truth?" He crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with me, his dark gaze intense. "You feel it too, don't you? This pull between us. You've felt it since the moment you looked at me in that shop." "That's just adrenaline," I tried to argue. Fear and gratitude mixed up together. "Is it?" His hand came up, and I froze as his fingers traced along my jawline with surprising gentleness. "Or is it something more? Something neither of us expected?" I should have pulled away, should have stood up, walked out, demanded he take me anywhere but here. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare into those dark eyes and wonder if he was right. "I don't even know you," I managed. "You will," he promised. "You'll know everything about me, Elena. And I'll know everything about you. Every secret, every fear, every desire. Because that's what it means to be mine. Complete and total knowledge of each other." "That's not protection," I whispered. "That's possession." His smile was slow and dangerous. "With me, they're the same thing." The days that followed fell into a rhythm that should have felt suffocating, but somehow didn't. I woke each morning in that beautiful blue room to find breakfast already waiting, prepared by Maria with a precision that suggested she'd been informed of my preferences. Preferences I didn't remember sharing with anyone. Coffee with just a splash of cream. Fruit, but never melon, which I'd always hated. Pastries that rotated daily but were never too sweet. Someone was watching me, learning me. The realization should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt oddly like being cared for. Ethan was usually gone by the time I woke. Marco would arrive at 7 to take him into the city for meetings I wasn't privy to. But he always returned by late afternoon. Sometimes he'd find me in the library, where I'd discovered an entire section of first editions that made my literature degree feel suddenly relevant. Other times he'd join me for dinner, the two of us eating in a formal dining room that felt less intimidating with each passing meal. We talked during those dinners, real conversations that went beyond the surface pleasantries I'd expected. He asked about my childhood. I told him about growing up in a small town upstate, my parents' quiet disappointment when I'd moved to the city to pursue writing dreams that never quite materialized. He told me about his grandfather, the man who'd started the leather shop, who'd built something from nothing through sheer determination, and, I suspected, methods that wouldn't bear close examination. He taught me everything, Ethan said one evening, swirling wine in his glass. We were on the 5th night of my stay, and I'd stopped counting down the hours until I could leave. How to read people, how to inspire loyalty, how to make decisions that others would shy away from. How to run a criminal empire, I asked, the wine making me bolder than usual. He smiled at my directness. He would have called it a business empire with occasional moral flexibility. But yes, essentially, don't you ever want to do something else? The question emerged before I could stop it. Something legitimate? The shop is legitimate, he pointed out. The real estate holdings, the restaurants, The import business, all legitimate. The other aspects. He shrugged. They're necessary evils, protection for the legitimate operations, insurance against those who would take what we've built. That's a convenient rationalization. It's the truth. His eyes met mine across the table. My grandfather came to this country with nothing, Elena. He was refused loans, refused opportunities, pushed to the margins by people who saw him as less than human because of where he came from. So he built his own opportunities, created his own system. And yes, some of that system operates outside the law, but it's kept 3 generations of my family safe, prosperous, and powerful. I won't apologize for that. I understood, in a way. My own grandfather had faced similar prejudices, though he'd chosen a different path. Backbreaking labor in factories, accepting less pay for harder work, dying young from the stress of it all. Maybe Ethan's grandfather had simply chosen survival over martyrdom. It was on the 6th day that everything changed. I was in the library again, curled up in a leather armchair with a first edition Hemingway that probably cost more than my car, when Ethan found me. He moved with that silent grace I'd come to expect, appearing in the doorway like a shadow made flesh. "Elena," he said, and something in his tone made me set the book aside immediately. "We need to talk." He crossed to the chair opposite mine and sat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He looked tired, I realized. There were shadows under his eyes I hadn't noticed before, and tension in the set of his shoulders. "What's wrong?" I asked, fear spiking through me. "Is it Derek? Did he—" "Derek won't be a problem anymore," Ethan said, and the finality in his voice sent a chill through me. "What did you do?" "What needed to be done?" He held my gaze steadily. "He received a visit from some associates of mine. They explained in terms he couldn't misunderstand what would happen to him if he continued to harass you. They were very persuasive." "You had him beaten up," I said, not quite a question. "I had him educated on the consequences of his actions. There's a difference." Ethan's expression hardened. "Men like him only understand power, Elena. Reason doesn't work. The law doesn't work. You know that. You've tried restraining orders before. The only thing that works is making them more afraid of you than they are obsessed with their victim." He was right, and I hated that he was right. I'd tried everything with Derek, reasoning with him, blocking him, filing police reports, getting a restraining order that he'd violated within days. Nothing had worked. Nothing had stopped him. Until Ethan. "Is he alive?" I had to ask. "Yes, bruised, frightened, and very clear on what will happen if he comes near you again. But alive." Ethan paused. "I keep my promises, Elena. I told you I'd protect you. Derek is no longer a threat. You could go home now, if you wanted." The words hung in the air between us. I could go home. Back to my tiny apartment, my coffee shop job, my ordinary life. Everything I'd thought I wanted just a week ago. "But that's not what we need to talk about," Ethan continued, and I heard the hesitation in his voice, the first time he'd sounded anything less than completely certain since I'd met him. "Then what is it?" He stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the grounds. The afternoon sun caught the edges of his dark hair, turning them almost bronze. When he spoke, he didn't turn around. "Your ex-boyfriend wasn't the only complication we needed to address." Ice spread through my veins. "What do you mean?" "Derek made noise before my men reached him, went to some of his friends, told them about you, about me, about how you'd run to some mob boss for protection." Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Word got back to some people who have interests in undermining my position. I don't understand." He turned then, and the look on his face made my breath catch. "In my world, Elena, weakness is death. The perception of weakness is almost as dangerous. When people heard that I'd taken a woman under my protection, a woman with no connection to the families, no strategic value, no reason for me to help her except... He trailed off. Except what? Except that I wanted to. The admission seemed to cost him something. That I saw you, terrified and desperate, and something in me decided you were mine to protect, mine to claim. And now certain people see that as weakness, as sentiment, as something they can exploit. I stood, my legs suddenly unsteady. You're saying I've put you in danger? No. He crossed to me in 3 long strides, his hands coming up to frame my face with surprising gentleness. You haven't done anything wrong, Elena. I chose this. I chose to help you, to bring you here, to make you mine. I'd make the same choice again. But there are consequences to that choice that we need to address. What kind of consequences? His thumbs traced along my cheekbones, the gesture achingly tender despite the darkness in his eyes. There's a family, the Castellanos, who've been looking for an excuse to move against me for years. They see you as that excuse, as proof that I'm getting soft, that I can be manipulated through emotional attachment. They're planning something. Then let me leave, I said quickly. If me being here puts you at risk? No. The word was absolute. That's exactly what they'd want. For me to show weakness by sending you away, by proving that their pressure works. And even if I did, his expression darkened further. They'd use you anyway, Elena. To get to me, to prove a point, to send a message to everyone else in our world about what happens when you show sentiment. The full reality of what he was saying crashed over me. I wasn't just under Ethan's protection anymore. I was a liability, a weakness, a target. What do we do? I whispered. His hand slid down to my shoulders, holding me steady. We eliminate the perception of weakness. We make it clear that you're not some random woman I'm protecting out of misplaced chivalry. We give them a reason for my interest in you that they can't exploit. How? By making it real. He took a breath, and I saw him choosing his next words carefully. By making you more than just someone under my protection. By making you my wife. The world tilted. What? Marry me, Elena. His voice was steady, certain, as though he were proposing a business merger rather than a life-altering commitment. Marry me, and you're no longer a weakness. You're an asset. You're family. You're protected by every alliance I've built, every obligation that binds our world together. The Castellanos can't touch you without starting a war that would destroy them. I pulled away from him, needing distance to think. You're insane. We barely know each other. I've been here less than a week. Time is irrelevant. He followed me, not touching but staying close. In my world, marriages are arranged in hours when strategic necessity demands it. This is no different. It's completely different. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Those marriages are business arrangements. You're talking about a business arrangement, he finished. That's exactly what I'm proposing. A marriage that serves both our interests. You get permanent protection, security, access to resources you've never dreamed of. I get the elimination of a vulnerability that threatens everything I've built. What about love? The question sounded naive even as I asked it. Something flickered in his dark eyes. What about it? You loved Derek once, didn't you? How did that work out? The words were harsh but not cruel. Love is a poor foundation for a marriage, Elena. But mutual benefit, protection, loyalty, those things last. And if I say no, then I'll keep you safe anyway. His voice softened. I won't force you into this, Elena. But understand what you're refusing. The Castellanos will keep coming. They'll find ways to use you against me, or they'll eliminate you as a distraction. Either way, your life will never be safe, never be normal. As my wife, you're untouchable. As my guest, you're a target. I sank back into the chair, my mind reeling. A week ago, I'd been running from one man who claimed to love me but wanted to control me. Now I was being asked to marry another man who offered protection instead of love, security instead of affection. Except that wasn't entirely true, was it? Because when Ethan looked at me with those dark eyes, when his hands framed my face with that unexpected gentleness, when he spoke my name like a prayer, there was something there beyond cold calculation. Something that made my heart race, and my breath catch, and my body lean toward his despite every logical reason to run. "Can I think about it?" I asked finally. "You have until tomorrow night." He crouched before me again, taking my hands in his. "The Castellanos are planning something for the annual charity gala tomorrow. Every family will be there, every alliance on display. If we arrive together as an engaged couple, it sends a message that can't be misinterpreted. If we arrive separately, or if I arrive without you, it confirms their narrative that you're a weakness they can exploit. So I have less than 24 hours to decide whether to marry a man I barely know." "Yes." His thumbs stroked across my knuckles. "I know it's not fair, Elena. I know it's not what you imagined for yourself. But I promise you this. As my wife, you'll want for nothing. You'll be protected, cherished, given every opportunity to build whatever life you want. And I'll never lay a hand on you in anger. I'll never hurt you the way Derek did. But you'll own me," I said quietly. He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I already own you, Elena. Whether you wear my ring or not, whether we marry or not, you're mine. You became mine the moment you ran into my shop. The only question is whether you accept that reality or fight against it. The honesty of it should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something inside me settling, as though he'd finally spoken a truth I'd been denying since that first night. "I need to be alone," I said. "To think." He nodded, rising to his feet. "Of course. I'll be in my office if you need me." "But Elena?" He paused at the door. "Whatever you decide, know that I'll protect you regardless. This isn't an ultimatum. You're not choosing between marriage and being thrown out on the street. You're choosing between two paths forward, both of which include me in your life. The only difference is how publicly we acknowledge what's already true." After he left, I sat in that leather chair for hours, watching the sun sink toward the horizon and thinking about choices and inevitability and the strange path that had led me here. I thought about Derek, about how his love had felt like chains, how his jealousy had masqueraded as devotion, his control as care, how I'd spent a year walking on eggshells, trying to be small enough, quiet enough, perfect enough to avoid triggering his rage. I thought about Ethan, about how his possession felt different, darker in some ways, more honest in others. He didn't pretend his claim on me was about my best interests. He didn't dress up control as concern or jealousy as love. He simply stated the truth. I was his, and he would protect what was his with every resource at his disposal. And I thought about myself, about the Elena who'd fled into that shop a week ago, terrified and alone and running from a danger she couldn't escape on her own. About the Elena who'd woken up this morning in a beautiful room, eaten breakfast prepared just for her, spent her day reading first editions in a library that felt like a sanctuary. About the Elena who felt safer in the home of an admitted criminal than she'd ever felt in her own apartment. When had I stopped wanting to leave? When had Ethan's presence shifted from threatening to comforting? When had the idea of going back to my old life started to feel like a prison rather than freedom? The sun had set completely by the time I made my way to Ethan's office. I knocked once and entered at his invitation. He was at his desk, reviewing documents on his laptop, but he looked up immediately when I entered. The desk lamp cast shadows across his face, making him look older, more tired, more human than the untouchable mob boss I'd first encountered. "Elena," he said, standing. "Have you decided?" I crossed the room until I stood before his desk, my heart hammering but my voice steady. "I have questions first." "Ask them." "If I marry you, do I have freedom? To work if I want, to have friends, to live my own life?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Within reason. You'll need security, that's non-negotiable. And there will be events you'll need to attend as my wife. But otherwise, your time is your own. If you want to work, work. If you want to pursue your writing, I'll make sure you have everything you need. If you want to go back to school, consider it done. And if I want to leave, if this doesn't work, if I can't do this..." His expression tightened, but he answered honestly, "I won't make it easy. I won't simply let you walk away. But I won't keep you prisoner either. If you're truly miserable, if you truly want out..." He paused. "We'll find a way that keeps you safe and preserves both our positions. But Elena, I don't expect it to come to that. I think you'll find being my wife has more benefits than drawbacks. You're very confident. I'm very certain of what I want. And I want you." The simple declaration sent heat through me. "Why?" I asked. "You could have any woman. Why me?" He moved around the desk, and I found myself backing up until I hit the bookshelf behind me. He followed, caging me in with an arm on either side of my head, his body close enough that I could feel his heat. "Because you ran into my shop terrified and desperate, and the first thing I thought was, mine," he said, his voice low and intense. "Because you stood your ground when I told you that you belonged to me, even though you were clearly frightened. Because you question me, challenge me, see me clearly, and don't look away. Because when I touch you..." His hand came up to trace my jawline, and I shivered. "You feel it too. This pull, this inevitability. That's not love," I whispered. "No," he agreed. "It's not. It's better. It's real. It's honest. It's a foundation we can build on, Elena. Love can come later, if it comes. But this certainty, this claim, this protection, that's here now. That's what I'm offering you." I looked up into those dark eyes and saw my future written there. Not a future I'd planned or dreamed of, but one that felt strangely, impossibly right. A future where I was cherished and protected, and claimed by a man who would burn down the world before letting anyone hurt me. Derek had claimed to love me, and hurt me anyway. Ethan promised only protection, and seemed incapable of causing me pain. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. "Yes," I said, the word escaping before I could second-guess myself. "I'll marry you." For just a moment, something fierce and triumphant flashed across his face. Pure, undiluted possession. Then he was kissing me, his hands framing my face as his mouth claimed mine with an intensity that stole my breath. This was nothing like the tentative kisses I'd shared with Derek in the early days of our relationship. This was claiming, consuming, a promise and a threat and a completion all at once. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, his hands still cupping my face. "Mine," he breathed. "Finally, completely mine." "Yours," I agreed, and felt something inside me settle into place, as though I'd been waiting my entire life for this moment, for this man, for this impossible future that shouldn't make sense, but somehow did. "We'll announce it tomorrow," Ethan said, pressing another kiss to my forehead. "At the gala. I'll have a ring for you by then. Something appropriate for my wife. Something that tells everyone exactly who you belong to." "You're very possessive," I observed. His smile was pure predator. "You have no idea, Elena. But you'll learn. You have a lifetime to learn exactly how possessive I can be." A lifetime. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they felt like a promise I was ready to keep. The next morning, I woke to find a garment bag hanging on the back of my door and a velvet box sitting on the dresser. My heart hammered as I approached them, knowing what they represented, the physical manifestations of the choice I'd made last night. The choice to become Ethan Moretti's wife. I opened the garment bag first, revealing a gown that made my breath catch. It was a deep emerald green that would complement my dark hair and fair skin perfectly, with a fitted bodice that would emphasize curves I usually tried to hide, and a flowing skirt that screamed elegance and wealth. The fabric felt like water under my fingers, silk so fine it seemed almost liquid. The velvet box was harder to open. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid, revealing the ring inside. It was stunning. A large emerald-cut diamond, at least 3 carats, maybe more, flanked by smaller diamonds that caught the morning light and scattered it across the room like stars. The platinum band was engraved with delicate vines that matched a pattern I'd noticed in some of Ethan's other family jewelry. This wasn't just a ring. It was a statement, a claim, a brand that announced to everyone who saw it exactly who I belonged to. I slipped it on my finger, and of course it fit perfectly. Everything Ethan did was perfect, calculated, planned down to the last detail. "It suits you." I spun around to find Ethan leaning against the doorframe, watching me with those dark, intense eyes. He was already dressed for the gala in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, his hair styled back, his jaw clean-shaven. He looked like sin and power wrapped in expensive fabric. "It's beautiful," I said, holding up my hand so the diamonds caught the light. "How did you know my ring size?" "I know everything about you, Elena." He pushed off the doorframe and crossed to me, taking my hand in his to examine how the ring looked on my finger. "Your sizes, your preferences, your habits. I've been learning you since the moment you ran into my shop. That should probably disturb me more than it does." His smile was slow and dangerous. "You're starting to understand how this works, how we work." He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles just above the ring. "Tonight, every family in the city will see this ring. They'll see you on my arm. They'll understand what you are to me." "And what am I to you?" "Everything." The word was simple but weighted with meaning. "My wife. My weakness and my strength. The one person in this world who matters more than power or money or empire." "You barely know me," I protested, though my heart was racing at his words. "I know enough." His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer. "I know you're brave enough to run when you need to, and strong enough to stand still when running would be easier. I know you're intelligent, observant, capable of seeing beneath surfaces to truths that others miss. I know you taste like coffee and honey in the morning, and that you curl up when you read, tucking your feet under you like a cat. I know you're mine, Elena, and I plan to spend the rest of our lives learning everything else." He kissed me then, slow and thorough, a kiss that promised things I wasn't ready to think about yet. When he pulled back, my knees were weak, and my breath was coming in short gasps. "Get ready," he murmured against my lips. "Maria will be up to help with your hair and makeup in an hour. We leave at 7. "Ethan?" I called as he moved toward the door. He paused, looking back. "What if I mess this up tonight? What if I say the wrong thing or—" "You won't." His confidence was absolute. "You're going to be perfect, Elena, because you're mine, and nothing of mine is ever less than perfect." Maria arrived exactly an hour later with a team that transformed me from ordinary Elena Carter into someone I barely recognized. They styled my dark hair into an elegant updo with a few strategic tendrils framing my face. The makeup was dramatic, but not overdone. Smoky eyes that made my green eyes pop. Lips painted a deep red that matched the color of wine. When they finally let me look in the mirror, I gasped. The woman staring back at me looked like she belonged in Ethan's world. Sophisticated, elegant, powerful in her own right. The emerald gown fit like it had been made for me, and knowing Ethan, it probably had been. Emphasizing curves I usually hid under oversized sweaters, and showing exactly enough skin to be alluring without being inappropriate. Mr. Moretti is going to lose his mind, Maria said with a knowing smile, making final adjustments to my hair. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, dear. How does he look at me? I asked, curious despite myself. Like he's finally found something he's been searching for his whole life. She met my eyes in the mirror. The Moretti men, they love fiercely when they love at all. His grandfather was the same way with his grandmother, completely devoted, absolutely possessive. It's in their blood. Before I could process that, there was a knock at the door. Maria opened it to reveal Giovanni, who gave a small bow. Mr. Moretti is waiting downstairs, Miss Carter. Or should I say, the future Mrs. Moretti. My stomach flipped at the title. The future Mrs. Moretti. That was me now. That was who I was becoming. I followed Giovanni downstairs, my heart hammering with each step. Ethan was waiting in the foyer, and when he turned to look at me, I saw his eyes widen fractionally, the first time I'd seen him show genuine surprise. Elena, he breathed, moving toward me as though pulled by an invisible thread. You look... He stopped, seeming at a loss for words, which I suspected didn't happen often. You're stunning. The dress helps, I said, trying to deflect the intensity of his gaze. It's not the dress. His hand came up to trace along my bare shoulder, the touch sending shivers down my spine. Though I'll admit the color was an excellent choice, it's you. You're radiant. He pulled a long velvet box from his pocket. One more thing. Inside was a necklace that matched the ring, emerald-cut diamonds set in platinum, with a larger central stone that nestled perfectly in the hollow of my throat. He fastened it around my neck himself, his fingers lingering on my skin. Now you're ready, he said, his voice low and possessive. Now everyone will see exactly who you belong to. The drive to the gala was quiet. Ethan held my hand the entire way, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm that I suspected were meant to be soothing, but only made me more nervous. We were in a different car tonight, a Rolls-Royce that probably cost more than most houses, with Marco driving and another man I didn't recognize in the passenger seat. That's Sal, Ethan explained, noticing my gaze. Additional security for tonight. The Castellanos will be there, and I'm not taking any chances with your safety. Will there be trouble? Not the kind you're thinking of. This is a charity gala, Elena. Everyone will be on their best behavior, smiling and making donations while plotting each other's downfall behind their perfect teeth. His smile was cynical. It's very civilized violence. You'll fit right in. The venue was a historic hotel in the heart of the city, its facade lit up like a palace. A red carpet led from the curb to the entrance, lined with photographers and what looked like society reporters. I tensed as I realized we'd have to walk through that gauntlet. Breathe, Ethan murmured, squeezing my hand. Head high, smile slight. Let them wonder who you are. Don't answer any questions. I'll handle all of that. Marco opened the door, and Ethan stepped out first, then turned to help me emerge with practiced grace. The moment I stood, cameras started flashing, voices calling out questions I couldn't quite make out over the chaos. Ethan's arm came around my waist, pulling me close against his side in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. We moved up the carpet at a measured pace. Ethan nodding to people he knew while keeping me tucked firmly against him. "Mr. Moretti, who's your companion?" one reporter called out. Ethan paused, turning to face the cameras with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Gentlemen, ladies, I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Elena Carter. We'll be married next month." The announcement caused an immediate frenzy. More questions, more flashing cameras, more voices competing to be heard. But Ethan just smiled that cold smile, held me closer, and continued into the hotel without answering anything else. "You just told them we're getting married next month," I hissed as we entered the elegant ballroom. "We haven't even discussed a timeline." "I just created one." He guided me through the crowd, nodding to people but not stopping. "Next month is perfect. Long enough to plan something appropriate, short enough that no one can interfere. You'll have Maria and a team of wedding planners at your disposal. Whatever you want, you'll have." "What if I want more time?" He looked down at me, his dark eyes intense. "Do you?" I opened my mouth to say yes, to demand more time to think, to plan, to prepare. But the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, I didn't want more time. More time just meant more opportunity for doubt, for fear, for second-guessing a decision that felt inevitable. "No," I admitted quietly. "I don't." His smile was triumphant. "Good, because I'm not waiting any longer than necessary to make you legally mine." The ballroom was magnificent, all crystal chandeliers and gold accents, with round tables draped in white linen surrounding a dance floor that gleamed under the lights. The crowd was exactly what I expected. Men in expensive tuxedos, women in designer gowns, everyone dripping with jewelry that could probably fund a small country. Ethan navigated through them with practiced ease, introducing me to people whose names I forgot immediately. There were too many faces, too many obviously fake smiles, too many assessing gazes that looked at my ring and my dress, and Ethan's possessive hold on me, and drew conclusions I could only guess at. "Ethan!" A booming voice cut through the polite murmur, and I turned to see a large man approaching us, with a beautiful blonde woman on his arm. I heard rumors you'd finally settled down, but I didn't believe them until I saw the announcement outside. "Antonio." Ethan's voice was cordial but cautious. "Good to see you. Elena, this is Antonio Russo and his wife, Gabriella. Antonio and I have known each other since we were boys." "Pleased to meet you," I said, extending my hand. Gabriella took it with a warm smile that seemed more genuine than most I'd received. "Welcome to the family, dear. I hope Ethan warned you what you're getting into." "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. Antonio laughed. "Honest, I like her, Ethan. Where did you find this one?" "She found me," Ethan replied, his hand tightening possessively on my waist. "Right place, right time, fate or luck. Take your pick, but she's mine now. So, I see." Antonio's gaze dropped to my ring, and something flickered in his expression. "That's the Moretti emerald, isn't it? I thought that stone was in your grandmother's necklace." "It was," Ethan confirmed. "I had it reset. Elena deserves nothing less than family heirlooms." The significance wasn't lost on me. This wasn't just an expensive ring. It was a piece of his family history, a declaration that I wasn't just some woman he was marrying for convenience. I was being welcomed into the Moretti legacy. "Your grandmother would have liked her," Gabriella said softly, and something in Ethan's expression softened. "Yes," he agreed. "She would have." We circulated for another hour, Ethan introducing me to what felt like hundreds of people. I smiled until my face hurt, made polite small talk, and tried to ignore the weight of all those assessing gazes. Some looked curious, some skeptical, some calculating. But underneath all of it was the same question. Who was Elena Carter? And how had she managed to catch Ethan Moretti? I was wondering the same thing. There. Ethan murmured in my ear, his lips brushing my skin in a way that made me shiver. The Castellanos, 3 o'clock. I turned slightly and saw them. A man who looked to be in his late 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and cold eyes, accompanied by a younger man who was clearly his son, and a woman who must be the wife. They were watching us with undisguised interest. Marco Castellano, Ethan continued quietly. His son, Vincent, and Marco's wife, Teresa. They're the ones who see you as my weakness. What do? We show them exactly how wrong they are. He turned to face them fully, and the Castellanos began moving through the crowd toward us. Moretti, Marco said when they reached us, his voice carrying a false warmth that didn't reach his eyes. I heard you had an announcement tonight. Imagine my surprise. Were you surprised, Marco? Ethan's tone was mild, but I felt the tension in his body. I rather thought my personal life was of great interest to you lately. Marco's smile tightened. We all have interest in maintaining the traditions of our world. Hasty marriages, especially to outsiders. His gaze flickered dismissively over me. Can create complications. Miss Carter is hardly an outsider now. Ethan's voice went cold. She's wearing my ring. She carries my name or will in a month. That makes her family. And you know as well as I do what happens to people who threaten the family. The threat was barely veiled, and I saw Vincent Castellanos' hand twitch toward his jacket before his father's subtle gesture stopped him. No one is threatening anyone, Marco said smoothly. I'm simply expressing concern for you, for all of us. Emotional attachments can be liabilities in our line of work. Then it's fortunate I didn't choose Elena out of emotion. Ethan's arm around me tightened. I chose her because she's intelligent, observant, and utterly loyal. Because she understands the value of discretion and the importance of family. Because she makes me stronger, not weaker. Any man who can't see that is a fool. The insult hung in the air between them. Marco's expression darkened, but before he could respond, Teresa Castellano spoke up. I'd love to hear how you two met, she said with a smile that was as fake as her husband's. It must be quite the romantic story. It was fate, I said before Ethan could answer, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. I was in trouble, and Ethan helped me. He saw something in me worth protecting, worth claiming, and I saw in him the kind of strength and certainty I'd been looking for my whole life without knowing it. It wasn't quite a lie. The words felt true even if the circumstances weren't quite as romantic as I was making them sound. How lovely, Teresa said, though her eyes remained calculating. And you're comfortable with what Ethan does? With his business interests? I'm comfortable with who he is, I replied, lifting my chin. The rest is just details. Ethan's hand squeezed my waist in what I hoped was approval. Well then, Marco said, his smile sharp as a blade. I suppose congratulations are in order. I hope the marriage brings you both everything you deserve. The way he said deserve made it sound like a curse, but Ethan just smiled coldly. Oh, it will, Marco. I assure you, it will. The Castellanos moved away, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. That was terrifying, I admitted quietly. You were perfect. Ethan steered me toward our table. You stood your ground, supported me, showed them exactly the kind of wife you'll be. I couldn't have asked for better. I wasn't acting, I said, realizing it was true. I meant what I said. About you being strong and certain. About fate. He stopped walking, turning to face me fully despite the crowds around us. His hand came up to cut my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. Elena, he said, my name a reverence on his lips. You continue to surprise me. Is that good or bad? It's perfect. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to my forehead that felt more intimate than any of the kisses we'd shared before. "You're perfect. And you're mine." "Yours," I agreed, and felt that same settling sensation I'd experienced the night before, as though pieces of myself I hadn't known were scattered were finally clicking into place. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Dinner was served, course after course of food I barely tasted because I was too nervous. Speeches were made by people raising money for causes I'd never heard of. And through it all, Ethan kept me close, his hand on my waist or my knee or my shoulder, a constant reminder of his presence and his claim. When the dancing started, he led me onto the floor without asking if I wanted to dance. His hand settled on my waist, the other taking mine, and we moved together with a natural grace that surprised me. "I didn't know you could dance," I said. "There's a lot you don't know about me yet." His voice was low, intimate, meant only for me despite the dozens of couples around us. "But you'll learn. We have a lifetime for you to learn all my secrets." "And will you learn mine?" "I already know most of them, Elena." His dark eyes held mine. "I know about your parents' disappointment when you moved to the city. I know about the novel you've been writing for 3 years, but never show anyone. I know about the miscarriage you had when you were 19 that you've never told anyone about. I know every scar, every fear, every dream you've kept hidden." My breath caught. "How? I told you. I know everything about you. I've known since the second day you were in my house. Because understanding you, knowing every part of you, is how I protect you. How I keep you safe." I should have been angry at the invasion of privacy. Should have been furious that he'd investigated my past without my permission. But instead, I felt something else. A strange relief at being so thoroughly known, so completely seen. "You don't think it's too much?" I asked. "Knowing someone so completely?" "I think it's the only way to truly possess someone." His hand tightened on my waist. "Surface knowledge is easy. Anyone can know your favorite color or how you take your coffee. But knowing the shape of your wounds, the texture of your fears, the architecture of your dreams, that's possession, Elena. That's ownership. That's what it means to be mine." The music swelled around us, and he pulled me closer until we were moving as one body, until I could feel his heartbeat against mine, until there was no space left between us at all. "I'm scared," I admitted in a whisper. "Of me? Of this? Of how right it feels when it shouldn't? Of how much I want this when I should be running? Of how completely I'm giving myself to you when I swore I'd never give myself to anyone again after Derek?" "I'm not Derek." His voice was firm. "I won't hurt you the way he did. I won't make you small or afraid or desperate. I'll make you powerful, Elena. I'll make you untouchable. I'll give you everything you've ever wanted and things you didn't know you needed. And all I ask in return is that you give yourself to me completely, that you trust me to protect you, to cherish you, to keep you safe from everyone, including yourself." "That's a lot to ask." "I know, but I'm asking anyway." He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. "Say yes again, Elena. Say you'll marry me. Say you'll be mine. Say it like you mean it this time, without doubt or fear." I pulled back enough to look into his eyes, those dark, intense eyes that saw everything, that knew everything, that promised everything, and I felt the last of my resistance crumble. "Yes," I whispered. "I'll marry you. I'll be yours, completely and without reservation." His smile was slow and triumphant and absolutely devastating. "Mine," he breathed. "Yours," I confirmed. And as he kissed me there on the dance floor, with hundreds of people watching, with the Castellanos surely plotting in the shadows, with my entire future hanging in the balance, I felt no fear, only certainty. I was Ethan Moretti's. And somehow, that was exactly what I'd been searching for all along. The wedding planning began the next morning with a precision that would have impressed a military general. I woke to find Maria and 3 other women waiting in my sitting room, armed with tablets, fabric swatches, and what looked like hundreds of photographs of flowers, venues, and cakes. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti," Maria said with a warm smile, using my future title as though it were already official. "We have exactly 4 weeks to plan a wedding worthy of the Moretti name. Shall we begin?" I'd barely had my coffee before I was being shown dress designs, asked about color preferences, and consulted on guest lists that included names I'd only ever seen in newspapers. It was overwhelming and surreal, and somehow exactly what I needed. A distraction from the enormity of what I was actually doing. Marrying a man I'd known for less than 2 weeks. A man who'd claimed me as his with a certainty that should have terrified me, but instead felt like the most natural thing in the world. "The ceremony will be at St. Anthony's, of course," Maria was saying, making notes on her tablet. "That's where all the Moretti men have been married for 3 generations. Father Michael is already aware and preparing. For the reception, Mr. Moretti has reserved the grand ballroom at the plaza. It can accommodate 500 guests comfortably." 500? I choked on my coffee. That many people? "The Moretti family has extensive connections," one of the other women, Sophia, the wedding planner, said diplomatically. "And this wedding sends an important message to the community. Everyone who matters will want to be there." What she meant, I was beginning to understand, was that this wedding was as much a political statement as a personal one. Ethan was showing the world, and specifically the Castellanos, that I wasn't a weakness or a liability. I was his wife, his partner, someone worth celebrating publicly and protecting fiercely. "What about my family?" I asked suddenly. "My parents. They should be invited, shouldn't they?" Maria and Sophia exchanged a glance. "Mr. Moretti said to leave that decision entirely to you," Maria said carefully. "If you want them there, they'll be invited with all due honor. If you'd prefer they weren't informed, that's also acceptable." I thought about my parents, their disappointment when I'd chosen the city over staying in their small town, their barely concealed judgment of my choices, their complete absence during my relationship with Derek, and the painful aftermath. We exchanged obligatory phone calls on holidays and birthdays, nothing more. "No," I decided. "Don't invite them. This isn't. They wouldn't understand this world. They'd be uncomfortable. And honestly, I'd rather not have to explain any of it to them." It was the truth, even if it stung a little. This life I was entering with Ethan existed in a completely different universe from the one my parents inhabited. Trying to bridge that gap for one day seemed more exhausting than it was worth. "Very well," Sophia made a note. "Now, for your dress, I've arranged for 3 of the city's top designers to bring their collections here tomorrow. Mr. Moretti has made it clear that cost is no object. You're to choose whatever you love." The rest of the morning passed in a whirlwind of decisions. Flowers, white roses and peonies. Colors, cream and gold with touches of emerald to match my engagement ring. Menu, a blend of Italian and American cuisine that honored Ethan's heritage, while acknowledging my own background. Music, a classical quartet for the ceremony, a full band for the reception. It was all beautiful and perfect and completely overwhelming. By the time the planning team finally left, promising to return tomorrow with dress options, I felt like I'd run a marathon. I collapsed onto the sofa in my sitting room, closing my eyes against the magnitude of it all. "Tired already?" Ethan's voice made me open my eyes to find him leaning against the door frame, watching me with an expression that was equal parts amusement and concern. "The planning has only just begun." "How do people do this?" I asked. "Plan a wedding in 4 weeks?" "They hire people who are very good at what they do." He crossed the room and sat beside me, his arm coming around my shoulders in a gesture that had become familiar. And they have unlimited resources. Money solves most logistical problems quite efficiently. Is that your solution to everything? Throw money at it until it works? Usually. He didn't sound apologetic. Though I've found that certain things require a more personal touch. The way he said it made heat pool in my stomach. We hadn't been intimate yet. Ethan had been surprisingly patient, stealing kisses but never pushing for more. But the promise of eventually was there in every look, every touch, every moment we spent together. I saw the guest list, I said, changing the subject before I did something foolish like climb into his lap. 500 people? 487, to be precise. His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder through the soft cashmere of my sweater. Every family that matters, every alliance that needs to be acknowledged, every potential enemy that needs to see exactly what you are to me. A trophy? A queen. His voice was firm. My equal, my partner, the woman who rules beside me. That's what they'll see, Elena. Not a weakness, not a liability, but strength. I don't feel very strong. That's because you're still learning what strength looks like in this world. He tilted my chin up so I had to meet his eyes. Strength isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet endurance. It's walking into a room full of people who'd rather you didn't exist, and holding your head high anyway. It's choosing to build a life in the face of uncertainty, rather than running from what frightens you. Is that what I'm doing? Isn't it? He challenged. You could have left after I dealt with Derek. You could have insisted on going back to your apartment, your job, your old life. But you stayed. You chose this. That takes strength, Elena. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was strength in choosing the unknown over the familiar, in trusting this dangerous man over trusting myself to survive alone. Or maybe I was just desperate enough and tired enough and drawn to him enough that I was calling surrender strength, because it was easier to accept that way. I want to show you something, Ethan said suddenly, standing and offering me his hand. Come with me. I let him pull me to my feet and lead me through the house. We went down corridors I hadn't explored yet, past rooms I'd only glimpsed, until we reached a door at the far end of the east wing that he unlocked with a key from his pocket. This was going to be a surprise for after the wedding, he said as he pushed the door open. But I think you could use it now. I stepped inside and stopped, my breath catching. It was an office, but not like any office I'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, already filled with books I recognized as the kind I loved. Classic literature, contemporary fiction, poetry collections, writing guides. A large mahogany desk sat in front of windows that overlooked the gardens, its surface clear, except for a state-of-the-art laptop, and a leather journal embossed with my initials. But it was the far corner that made tears prick my eyes. There was a cozy reading nook with a deep armchair positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon light, a small table beside it already set with a French press, and a collection of premium coffee beans. And on the wall above, framed in simple but elegant frames, were the first 3 chapters of the novel I'd been writing. The one I'd never shown anyone. The one I was certain no one even knew existed. How did you... I couldn't finish the question. I told you, I know everything about you. Ethan moved to stand behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders. Including the fact that you're a brilliant writer who's been too afraid to share her work with anyone. That changes now. You can't just... I can, and I did. His voice was firm, but gentle. Elena, you're going to be my wife. That means you'll want for nothing, including time and space to pursue your dreams. This room is yours, your sanctuary. You can write here, read here, exist here without anyone bothering you. And when you're ready, when you've finished that novel you've been working on, I have connections with publishers who would be thrilled to read it. You've thought of everything. That's what I do. His lips brushed my temple. I see what people need, sometimes before they know they need it themselves, and I provide it. It's how I've built my empire. It's how I'll take care of you. I turned in his arms, looking up at this man who'd upended my life so completely. This is too much, Ethan. The room, the wedding, all of it. I don't know how to accept all this without feeling like I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything. His hands framed my face with that gentle possessiveness I'd come to crave. You're giving me yourself, Elena. Your trust, your loyalty, your future. That's worth more than any room or ring or wedding. That's worth everything. I don't understand you, I admitted. You're this powerful, dangerous man who could have anyone, anything. Why me? Really? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine as though deciding how much truth to share. Finally, he spoke. Do you know what it's like to live in a world where everything is transactional? Where every relationship, every alliance, every connection exists only because of what it can provide? Where people smile to your face while planning your downfall? Where loyalty is bought and sold? Where love is a weapon used to manipulate and control? I shook my head. That's been my entire life, Elena. From the moment I was old enough to understand what my family was, what I was expected to become. I've never had a relationship that wasn't calculated. Never made a friend who didn't have an ulterior motive. Never met a woman who wanted me rather than what I could provide. He paused, his thumb tracing my lower lip. Until you ran into my shop, terrified and desperate, and looked at me like I was salvation instead of damnation. You didn't know who I was. You didn't want anything from me except safety. And when you learned what I was, you didn't try to use it or leverage it or manipulate me with it. You just accepted it as part of who I am. That's not entirely true, I felt compelled to point out. I was terrified of you. I am still terrified of you sometimes. Fear and acceptance aren't mutually exclusive. His smile was soft, and I'd rather have your honest fear than false adoration. At least with you, I know where I stand. You don't pretend, Elena. You don't perform. You're real in a way that nothing else in my life has ever been real. That's why I want you. That's why you're mine. The raw honesty in his words made my chest tight. This man who commanded an empire with cold calculation, who made people disappear with a few quiet words, who inspired fear in hardened criminals. He was offering me something precious and vulnerable. The truth of his loneliness, the weight of his isolation, the hunger for something genuine in a world built on lies. I'm not as real as you think, I said quietly. I'm broken, Ethan. Derek broke something in me that I'm not sure can be fixed. I'm damaged goods. Then we're well matched. His voice was fierce. Because I'm broken too, Elena. This world, this life, it breaks you in ways that can't be repaired. But maybe two broken people can fit together in a way that makes the cracks less obvious. Maybe we can build something strong from our damaged pieces. That's a lot of maybes. All of life is maybes. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. But I'm certain about this. About you. About us. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I reached up, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. Show me, I whispered. Show me you're certain. His eyes darkened with desire, with possession, with a hunger that matched my own. Elena, he warned, if I start this now, I won't stop. I won't be gentle and I won't hold back. Are you sure that's what you want? In answer, I pulled him down and kissed him, pouring all my confusion and fear and desperate need into it. He made a sound low in his throat, half growl, half groan, and then his control shattered. His hands were everywhere, tangling in my hair, gripping my waist, sliding down to cut my hips and pull me hard against him. He walked me backward until my back hit the bookshelf, and his mouth left mine to trail fire down my throat, finding that sensitive spot below my ear that made me gasp. Mine. He breathed against my skin. Say it, Elena. Tell me you're mine. Yours, I gasped, my head falling back to give him better access. I'm yours, Ethan. He lifted me then, my legs wrapping automatically around his waist as he carried me to the desk, sweeping the laptop aside with one hand and setting me on the edge. His hands found the hem of my sweater, pulling it over my head in one smooth motion. And then his mouth was on me again, worshipping every inch of exposed skin. I should have felt vulnerable, exposed in nothing but my bra and jeans while he remained fully clothed. But instead, I felt powerful. Because this man, this dangerous, controlled man, was coming undone because of me. For me. Tell me to stop, he demanded, his hands working the button of my jeans. Tell me to stop and I will. Tell me you want to wait until after the wedding, until this is official, and I'll wait. But if you don't stop me now, Elena, I'm making you mine in every way that matters. Don't stop, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I don't want to wait. I want this. I want you. Something fierce and triumphant flashed across his face. Then you'll have me, he promised. All of me. Forever. What followed was a claiming in the truest sense, not gentle or tentative, but fierce and absolute, a physical manifestation of the bond that had been building between us since that first night. He worshipped my body with a single-minded intensity that left me gasping and trembling, pushing me higher and higher until I shattered in his arms, his name a prayer on my lips. Afterward, we lay tangled together on the reading nook's chair. Somehow we'd made it there, though I couldn't quite remember the journey. Ethan's shirt was unbuttoned and my clothes were scattered across the floor, but neither of us moved to retrieve them. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, and I felt boneless, sated, completely at peace for the first time in longer than I could remember. No regrets? He asked quietly. No, I answered honestly. Should I have some? Most people would. His hand stilled on my shoulder. We're getting married in 4 weeks, Elena. Some might say we should have waited, done things properly. Since when do you care about doing things properly? I lifted my head to look at him. You kidnapped me, declared me yours without asking, investigated my entire life without permission, and are forcing me into a marriage that serves your strategic interests as much as it protects me. I don't think having sex before the wedding is where we should start worrying about propriety. He laughed, a genuine, full laugh that transformed his face and made him look younger, less burdened. Fair point, though for the record, I didn't kidnap you. You came willingly. Under duress. Under my protection. His hand resumed its gentle patterns. There's a difference. Is there? I challenged, though I was smiling. Yes. He grew serious again. Kidnapping implies you're a prisoner, but you're not, Elena. You never have been. You could walk out that door right now if you truly wanted to. I'd hate it. I'd probably follow you. I'd definitely make sure you were protected from a distance. But I wouldn't force you to stay. You say that now, after you've already claimed me in every way possible. I say that always. His dark eyes held mine. You're mine by choice, Elena. Your choice, even if I pushed you toward making it. That matters to me. It matters more than you know. I believed him, against all logic and reason. I believed that this dangerous man with his calculated ruthlessness and his empire built on fear actually cared about my consent, my choice, my agency in all of this. I'm still scared, I admitted. Not of you, exactly, but of how much I want this, of how right it feels when it shouldn't, of how completely I've given myself to you in such a short time. Good. His voice was firm. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you aware of the stakes. Just don't let it paralyze you. We're building something here, Elena. Something real and lasting. But it requires courage. From both of us. What are you afraid of? I asked, curious. You don't seem afraid of anything. I'm afraid of losing you. The admission was quiet, but absolute. I'm afraid that you'll wake up one day and realize what you've bound yourself to, what kind of man I really am, and you'll look at me with fear or disgust instead of acceptance. I'm afraid that loving you... He stopped, his jaw tightening. Loving me? I prompted, my heart hammering. Yes. He met my eyes steadily. Loving you. That's what this is, Elena. I didn't plan it, didn't expect it. But somewhere between you running into my shop and right now, I fell in love with you. And that terrifies me more than any enemy or rival or threat I've ever faced. Because loving you gives you power over me that no one else has ever had. Tears pricked my eyes at the raw honesty in his voice. I don't want power over you. I know. That's one of the reasons I love you. He pulled me closer, tucking my head under his chin. You don't want to manipulate or control me. You just want to be safe, to be seen, to be cherished. And I can give you all of that, Elena. I will give you all of that and more, every day for the rest of our lives. I think. I hesitated, then decided to be as honest as he'd been. I think I might be falling in love with you too. Or maybe I already have. I don't know how to tell the difference between love and Stockholm Syndrome and gratitude and desire and everything else I feel when I'm with you. Does it matter? He asked. As long as you choose to stay, as long as you want this life with me. Does it matter what we call it? I guess not. I relaxed against him, listening to the steady beat of his heart. But for what it's worth, I'm choosing to call it love. Because that feels true in a way nothing else has in a very long time. His arms tightened around me. Then I'll take it. I'll take your love and your trust and your loyalty, and I'll give you mine in return. We'll build something unshakable, Elena. Something that no enemy can tear down, no threat can damage, no force can destroy. That's a big promise. I keep my promises. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. Always. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and the quiet certainty of what we were building. Outside, the afternoon was giving way to evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And in that beautiful office, my sanctuary, a gift from a man who saw what I needed before I knew to ask for it, I felt something settle deep in my chest. This was right. This dangerous, impossible, completely insane arrangement was exactly what I'd been searching for without knowing it. A man who claimed me without apology, protected me without hesitation, loved me without conditions. I was Ethan Moretti's, and he was mine, and God help anyone who tried to come between us. The wedding dress arrived 3 days before the ceremony, wrapped in layers of tissue paper and carried by 2 assistants who handled it like it was spun from starlight. When they unveiled it in my room, I couldn't breathe. It was perfect. Ivory silk that seemed to glow in the afternoon light, with delicate lace sleeves and a fitted bodice that would emphasize my figure before flowing into a full skirt. The back was open, dipping low to reveal skin, and the train was just long enough to be dramatic without being impractical. Tiny crystals were sewn into the lace, catching the light with every movement. Mr. Moretti approved this design personally, one of the assistants said, as Maria helped me into it for the final fitting. He was very specific about what he wanted. Elegant but not ostentatious. Traditional but with modern touches. Something that would make you look like a queen. I stared at myself in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. With my dark hair loose around my shoulders, and this dress transforming me into someone who belonged in Ethan's world, I looked like I'd been born for this, like I'd always been meant to be Mrs. Moretti. "You're going to take his breath away," Maria said softly, adjusting the train. "I've worked for the Moretti family for 15 years, and I've never seen Mr. Ethan look at anyone the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" I asked, echoing the same question I'd asked weeks ago, though now I thought I knew the answer. "Like you're the only real thing in his world." She met my eyes in the mirror. "Like he'd burn the city down before letting anyone hurt you. Like he's finally found something worth living for instead of just surviving." Her words made my chest tight with emotion. In the 3 weeks since I'd agreed to marry him, Ethan had shown me a side of himself I suspected few people ever saw. The man beneath the mob boss, the person behind the power. He was attentive without being controlling, protective without being possessive in the suffocating way Derek had been. He gave me space when I needed it, and held me close when I didn't. And the way he looked at me, Maria was right. It was like I was precious, irreplaceable, the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. "I'm ready," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was talking about the dress fitting, or the wedding, or the life I was about to step into. Maybe all three. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold, the late October sky a brilliant blue that seemed almost artificial in its perfection. I woke alone. Ethan had observed the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony, staying at his apartment in the city the night before, and found myself simultaneously nervous and calm. The nerves were surface level, butterflies about the ceremony and the crowds and saying vows in front of 500 people. But underneath was a deep, unshakable certainty. This was right. Marrying Ethan Moretti was the rightest thing I'd ever done. Maria and her team descended on me at 8 in the morning, beginning the long process of transformation. Hair, makeup, nails, everything had to be perfect. By noon, I was finally ready, standing in my room in that beautiful dress, holding a bouquet of white roses and peonies that matched the arrangements throughout St. Anthony's. "You look beautiful, dear," Maria said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Your mother would be proud." The mention of my mother sent a pang through me. I'd thought about calling her a dozen times over the past weeks, imagined trying to explain this whirlwind romance and sudden marriage to a man she'd never met. But in the end, I'd decided against it. She'd chosen to keep me at arm's length for years. This was simply a continuation of that distance. "Thank you, Maria." I squeezed her hand. "For everything. You've been more of a mother to me these past weeks than my own has been in years." She pulled me into a gentle hug, careful not to crush the dress. "You're family now, Elena. That's what we do. We take care of our own." Family. The word had taken on new meaning since entering Ethan's world. It wasn't just about blood relations, but about loyalty, about chosen bonds that ran deeper than biology. I was becoming part of something larger than myself, and for the first time in my life, that didn't feel suffocating. It felt like belonging. The drive to St. Anthony's was surreal. Marco drove. Ethan had insisted on his most trusted man handling my security, even on our wedding day. And Sal sat in the passenger seat, both men in formal suits that couldn't quite hide the weapons I knew they carried. Protection, even today. Maybe especially today, when I'd be most visible, most vulnerable to anyone who might still see me as Ethan's weakness. St. Anthony's was a beautiful old church, all stone and stained glass, with a bell tower that had been ringing every Sunday for over 100 years. As we pulled up to the entrance, I could see crowds of people already inside. The pews would be packed with the families that controlled this city's underworld, all gathered to witness the union that made me untouchable. Giovanni was waiting at the entrance, looking distinguished in his formal attire. He would walk me down the aisle, another departure from tradition, but Ethan had insisted. "Giovanni has been with the family longer than anyone," he'd said. He's as close to a father figure as I've had since my grandfather died. It would honor me if he escorted you." "You're ready, Miss Elena?" Giovanni asked, offering his arm. In his other hand, he held a small velvet box. "Mr. Ethan asked me to give you this before you walked in. He said to tell you that you were beautiful before you even put it on. But this would complete the picture." I opened the box to find a delicate diamond bracelet. Not flashy, but elegant, with stones that caught the light and scattered it like tears. It matched my engagement ring perfectly, and when I clasped it around my wrist, I felt like I was putting on armor. Diamonds weren't just beautiful, they were the hardest substance on earth. Unbreakable, like what Ethan and I were building together. "I'm ready," I said, taking Giovanni's arm. The organ music swelled as we entered the church, and every head turned to watch me walk down the aisle. I saw faces I recognized from the gala. Antonio Russo and his wife Gabriella, giving me warm smiles. Marco Castellano and his family, their expressions harder to read. Dozens of others whose names I'd learned over the past weeks, the network of families and alliances that made up Ethan's world. But I barely saw any of them, because at the end of that long aisle, standing beside the priest with Marco as his best man, was Ethan. He wore a black tuxedo that looked like it had been crafted by angels, his dark hair styled back to reveal the strong lines of his face. But it was his expression that stole my breath, raw emotion breaking through his usual control, something between awe and possession, and pure, undiluted love. He mouthed 2 words as I walked toward him. "My queen." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. "My king," I mouthed back. Giovanni placed my hand in Ethan's with a gentle squeeze, then stepped back. Ethan's fingers closed around mine, warm and strong and absolutely certain. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. "I knew you would be, but seeing you like this... Elena, you're perfect." "So are you," I whispered back. The ceremony was traditional, Catholic, with all the formal prayers and rituals Ethan's grandfather would have expected. But I barely heard the words. I was too focused on Ethan, on the way his thumb stroked across my knuckles, on the fierce love in his eyes, on the absolute certainty in his voice when he spoke his vows. "I, Ethan Dominic Moretti, take you, Elena Rose Carter, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, to protect you, to cherish you above all others. I promise that no harm will come to you while I draw breath, that no enemy will touch you, that no force on earth will separate us. You are mine, and I am yours, from this day forward, for all the days of our lives." They weren't the traditional vows, but they were perfect. They were us, a promise of protection and possession wrapped in devotion. When it was my turn, I spoke from the heart, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. "I, Elena Rose Carter, take you, Ethan Dominic Moretti, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand beside you, to trust in your protection, to be your partner in all things. I promise to be loyal, to be honest, to give you all of myself without reservation. You claimed me as yours, and I accept that claim. You are mine, and I am yours, from this day forward, for all the days of our lives." "The rings," Father Michael prompted, and Marco stepped forward, with a velvet cushion bearing 2 platinum bands. Ethan slid mine onto my finger, a perfect match to the engagement ring, engraved with the same delicate vines. When it was my turn to place his ring, my hands trembled slightly, but his steadying touch calmed me. The band was wide and masculine, engraved with something in Italian that I'd have to ask him to translate later. "By the power vested in me by the Church and the state of New York," Father Michael intoned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Ethan's hands framed my face with that familiar, gentle possessiveness, and he kissed me like we were the only two people in the room. It was tender and fierce and completely inappropriate for a church, and I didn't care. This was our moment, our claiming, our beginning. When we finally broke apart, the church erupted in applause. Ethan kept my hand firmly in his as we turned to face our guests, our families, our allies, our community. I caught sight of the Castellanos in the third row, Marco's expression unreadable. But it didn't matter. Whatever threat they'd posed, whatever weakness they'd tried to exploit, it was neutralized now. I was Mrs. Ethan Moretti, and that made me untouchable. The reception at the plaza was even more overwhelming than the ceremony. The ballroom had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Thousands of white roses and peonies, crystal chandeliers glittering overhead, tables draped in cream and gold, and a dance floor that gleamed under carefully positioned lights. Ethan and I entered to thunderous applause, and I felt his hand tighten on mine. Not nervousness, but possession. Pride. "Look what's mine," that grip said. "Look what I've claimed." The first dance was to a song I didn't recognize. Something slow and Italian, probably chosen for its significance to Ethan's family, rather than any sentimental connection. But as he held me close, and we moved together across that polished floor, it became ours. Our song, our moment, our promise. "Are you happy?" he murmured against my hair. "Yes," I answered honestly. Terrified, overwhelmed, completely out of my depth, but happy. "Is that strange?" "No." His arms tightened around me. "It's perfect, just like you." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and toasts and more food than I could possibly eat. Antonio Russo gave a speech that made everyone laugh, talking about how Ethan had always been too serious, too controlled, and how it took the right woman to finally crack that ice. Marco gave a shorter toast, surprisingly warm, welcoming me officially into the family. But it was when Marco Castellano approached our table that the mood shifted. "Congratulations," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Mrs. Moretti, you look lovely. Ethan, you've done well for yourself." "Thank you, Marco." Ethan's voice was cool but polite. "I'm glad you could make it. I wouldn't have missed it." Marco's eyes moved between us, assessing. "You've made quite the statement today. Marrying outside the families, bringing someone new into our world. It's bold." "Elena is family now," Ethan replied. "That's all that matters." "Of course." Marco inclined his head. "I hope the marriage brings you both happiness and stability. We all benefit when our leaders are settled, focused, not distracted by complications." The threat was barely veiled. "Do your job. Don't let your new wife become a distraction, or we'll have problems." But before Ethan could respond, I surprised myself by speaking up. "Mr. Castellano," I said, my voice steady despite the intimidation I felt. "I understand you have concerns about whether I'll be a distraction to my husband. Let me assure you, I have no intention of interfering with Ethan's business or his responsibilities to the families, but I also have no intention of being seen as a weakness. I'm his wife now, which means I'm protected by every alliance he's built, every obligation that binds this community together. Anyone who threatens me threatens him, threatens all of us. I hope that's clear." Silence fell around our table. Marco stared at me, clearly surprised by my boldness. Then, slowly, he smiled, not his usual cold smile, but something that might have been genuine respect. "Very clear, Mrs. Moretti. It seems Ethan has chosen even more wisely than I realized. You'll do well in this world." After he walked away, Ethan leaned close. "That was dangerous," he murmured, "and incredibly sexy, standing up to Marco Castellano at your own wedding. You continue to surprise me, wife. Wife. The word sent a thrill through me. I was someone's wife again. But this time it felt different. Not like Derek's attempts to control me through legal bonds, but like a partnership built on mutual strength and respect. I meant what I said, I told him. I won't be seen as your weakness. I won't give anyone ammunition to use against you. If I'm going to be part of this world, I'm going to be an asset, not a liability. You already are. He pressed a kiss to my temple. You're everything, Elena. Everything I never knew I needed. The celebration continued late into the night. We cut an elaborate 5-tiered cake, danced with various family members and allies, and played our parts perfectly. The devoted couple, the united front, the power that no one would dare to challenge. But finally, blessedly, it was time to leave. Ethan had arranged for us to spend our wedding night at his apartment in the city, the penthouse I'd never been to, his private sanctuary away from the estate and all its staff. Tomorrow we'd fly to Italy for 2 weeks, a honeymoon that was equal parts vacation and strategic business as he introduced me to his family's connections overseas. But tonight, it would be just us. The penthouse was stunning, all floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture in shades of charcoal and cream, artwork that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. But I barely registered any of it. I was too focused on Ethan as he closed the door behind us and slowly turned to face me. Alone at last, he said, his voice dropping to that low register that made heat pool in my stomach. My wife. Your wife, I agreed, stepping out of my heels and immediately shrinking several inches. That's still so strange to say. You'll get used to it. He crossed to me, his hands finding my waist, pulling me close. You'll say it every day for the rest of our lives, and eventually it'll feel as natural as breathing. Promise? Promise. His lips found mine, the kiss starting gentle but quickly deepening into something more urgent, more desperate. We'd maintained control all day, playing our parts perfectly for the cameras and the crowds. But here, alone, that control shattered. His hands found the zipper of my dress, sliding it down with agonizing slowness. The silk pooled at my feet, leaving me in nothing but the delicate white lingerie Maria had insisted was tradition. Ethan's eyes darkened as they traveled over me, possessive and hungry. Mine, he breathed. Every inch of you, mine. Yours, I confirmed, reaching for his bow tie, my fingers fumbling with the knot until he helped me, shrugging out of his jacket and unbuttoning his shirt to reveal the chest I'd memorized over the past weeks. What followed was different from that first time in my office, less desperate, more deliberate. He worshipped every inch of me with his hands and mouth, taking his time, learning what made me gasp and shiver and beg. And when he finally claimed me, it felt like a completion, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Afterward, we lay tangled in his bed, our bed now, my head on his chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. No regrets? He asked, echoing that same question from weeks ago. None, I answered honestly. This is insane and impulsive and probably the craziest thing I've ever done, but I don't regret any of it. Good. His arms tightened around me. Because you're stuck with me now, Mrs. Moretti. For better or worse, richer or poorer. Though let's be honest, it'll always be richer with me. In sickness and health, till death do us part. That's a very traditional view for someone who operates outside the law. I'm traditional about the things that matter. His voice was serious. Family, loyalty, marriage, those things are sacred to me. I might break every other rule, but I won't break my vows to you, Elena. Never. I believe you, I said, and realized I meant it. This dangerous man who'd claimed me so completely, who'd upended my life and declared me his without asking, He would keep his promises. He would protect me, cherish me, be faithful to me even when he was ruthless with everyone else. "I love you," I said suddenly, the words spilling out before I could second-guess them. I know it's fast and crazy and probably some kind of psychological thing I should examine more closely. But I love you, Ethan. I love who you are with me, who you've let me see beneath all the power and control. I love that you're dangerous to everyone except me. I love that you claimed me and then spent every day since proving you were worthy of that claim. He was silent for so long that I started to worry I'd said too much, admitted too much. But then he shifted, rolling us so he was above me, his dark eyes intense as they held mine. "I love you too, Elena Moretti. I loved you from the moment you ran into my shop looking for salvation. I loved you more when you challenged me, stood up to me, saw exactly who I was, and chose me anyway. And I'll love you every day for the rest of our lives, with everything I have, everything I am. You're not just my wife. You're my heart, my home, my everything." Tears slipped down my temples as he kissed me again, tender and fierce and absolutely certain. And as we came together once more, sealing our vows in the most intimate way possible, I finally understood what I'd found. Not just protection from Derek or safety or security, though I had all of those things, but something deeper, something I'd been searching for my whole life without knowing it. A place where I belonged, a person who saw me completely and loved me anyway. A future built not on fear or desperation, but on choice and devotion, and an unshakable certainty that we were meant to be exactly here, exactly together. I'd run into Ethan Moretti's shop to escape danger, but I'd found so much more than safety. I'd found love. I'd found home. I'd found myself. And I'd found a man who would burn the world down before letting anything hurt me. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our estate, watching snow fall gently outside the windows. My hand rested on my still flat stomach, though the pregnancy test in my pocket said I wouldn't be flat much longer. Ethan and I had talked about children. Eventually, we'd said, after we'd had time to adjust to marriage, to really build our foundation. But apparently fate had other plans. Or maybe this was always meant to be. Another piece clicking into place, another chapter in a story that had started with me running through the rain and ended with me running toward the most dangerous man I'd ever met. I heard his footsteps before I saw him, that familiar cadence that made my heart race even now. His arms came around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "The future," I said honestly. "Our future." "And what do you see?" I turned in his arms, looking up at this man who'd claimed me so completely. My husband, my protector, my love. "Everything," I said. "I see everything." And I did. A future full of challenges and joy, of danger navigated together and triumphs celebrated side by side. A future where I was never alone, never unprotected, never unloved. A future built on the foundation of that rainy night when I'd run into a shop seeking escape and found salvation instead. "I love you," I said, "more every day." "I love you too," he replied. "Always and forever, my Elena, my wife, my everything." And as he kissed me there in our kitchen, with snow falling outside and our future spreading before us like an unwritten page, I knew I'd made the right choice. The only choice. I'd chosen Ethan Moretti. And he'd chosen me right back, forever.